So I guess I was kind of pre-programmed to be interested in it.
I'm
And
the same way. I had a really big interest when I lived in England. And it's funny because in Canada, though we do have our history, it is definitely, I would say, not as interesting as kind of the medieval times era. And when I was there, like in grade 6, that was the era where they were really studying this stuff. I found it so
yeah.
cool, so cool. So I think that's what really attracted me to your channel as well was the it just piqued my interest again. I felt like a kid again listening to this really interesting topic. So thank you for reigniting that in me.
Oh, well, that's well. I'm flattered. I'm honored that because that's actually my purpose. My purpose is to spread a passion, love, and interest in history in general, not just medieval history. But I feel like history in school in most parts of the world is taught terribly. It is it is treated like a chore. It is treated like a series of dates, battles, and treaties, and great men mostly that to which no one can relate. No one feels any emotional connection to that, right? But they
Yeah.
never teach you about daily life. They never tell you what it was like to be a person living in any given era. That's how we connect, is to realize that we're not that different than our ancestors or the people who came before us.
I love
So,
that. Exactly. And as a therapist too, right? I really do feel that in my heart's heart. It's like, how can we relate to people? Because that's what brings us closer together. That's how we learn how to not make the mistakes of the past as well.
that should be, it should be
It should
how
be.
we learn.
Theoretically, yes. Do you have any kind of takeaways of kind of mistakes that were made in the past during the medieval times that maybe we should implement these days?
Right. I mean, it, we certainly we actually learned a lot in the Middle Ages that we actually still continue to do with quarantine. Quarantine comes from the Black Death. It was the Venetians who invented the quarantine. And and so that is for epidemics. When you have an epidemic, the quarantine is the number one tool to prevent the spread of the epidemic. And that's something we learned in the Middle Ages, and yet we seem to have forgotten it sometimes, occasionally. And even in the 19th century, the English doctors started saying, we shouldn't quarantine people anymore. We should just let them, because that's an infraction on their liberty. We can't impinge their liberty. So we knew things once upon a time that we've forgotten. A lot of the things that were bad, that I would say were bad about medieval practices, we thankfully don't do anymore. So we've learned those lessons. We've learned that if you're going to be soldiers in the battlefield, you need to have sanitation. You need to
Yes,
have,
that was a
yeah,
big
right,
lesson learned. Was that
right.
discovered in the medieval times? Kind of. Oh yeah, you mentioned that in our last live stream. I think it
It
was
is
more of like
up
Middle
until
Eastern.
the 20th century. Most people who died in battle did not die a glorious death on the battlefield. They died in camp of dysentery or septicemia, either from the unsanitary conditions or from their wounds getting septic. So no, we didn't. Not only didn't we not learn that in the Middle Ages, how we didn't figure it out in the West anyway. We didn't figure it out until the 20th century. So
Wow,
you know,
the
we
20th century. Yikes.
we yeah, there's a lot of things we were still doing in the early 20th century. uh, you know Antibiotics changed everything. They really did. Vaccines and antibiotics changed everything on the medical front. And that's those two aspects or those two aspects of modern medicine are two very good reasons why I don't want to actually travel back in
Mm,
person with my body and experience pre modern
really?
life.
No
Yeah,
way.
I
So if
don't.
you had the option, you would not go
Nope.
back in time. That is interesting. Why?
Not unless I had,
Give me
not unless
honest
I had my
reasons
own, not
why.
unless I had my own medical kit, because
Okay, medical kit. Yeah.
unless I had my own little emergency supply of emergency antibiotics for everything from penicillin to gorillacillin, and a supply of vaccines.
Yeah.
And go back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to do it. It's just too risky.
That's
Mm-mm.
that's something that I think about when I think about the past and medieval times. How scary that must be. Like if you get sick, you would know, okay, like it's not looking good for me. You know, like
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
that
I
must
mean,
be very anxiety inducing, just in general.
people, yeah, people died of colds, of
Right?
flus,
Yeah.
and it's not even necessarily that it's the microbes that themselves that killed. It's the symptoms that were unleashed by the infection led to dehydration. If they
Right.
didn't have a way to keep your body hydrated, if the effluents are just flowing freely, you would die of dehydration, basically.
Oh my gosh.
So,
Do you think
now we
people
have
are very
IVs.
Yeah. Do you think people are very accepting of the concept of,
Oh,
passing
yeah.
away since it was so prevalent in the society? Like, how do you think that would impact their mental health? Was it just kind of accepted, or do you think people were just kind
No.
of miserable all the time?
No, I mean, miserable. I think people have always been deeply impacted by the passing of our loved ones. I was at a Korean museum a couple of days ago, and they found the skeleton of a little boy of about 6 from
Mm,
50,000 years ago.
wow.
And they found flowers on his chest. There was the residue of flowers were on his chest. So 50,000 years ago, we have already started engaging in funerary practices that show that death is very significant to us, that show a connection to each other, and that the passing of one of us is indeed a very moving and probably painful time.
Mm,
So medieval people absolutely mourned death, and there's this weird myth. There's this a myth that medieval parents didn't love their children because their children died very young, and so they just didn't develop an emotional connection to them. It is true that infant mortality in the pre-modern era was very high. It is
mm,
not true that the parents did not love them and mourn them deeply. We have all kinds of writings from parents whose children have died talking about how much they mourn them and miss them. There's the letters from Alessandro Strozzi. She loses a lot of her children to the plague, actually. She
oh,
loses
that's
half
so
of her family to
sad.
the plague in 15th century Florence. And she writes letters. This massive corpus of letters of hers have survived. And she talks, every time someone dies, she writes about it, and you can tell she's heartbroken. So,
Yeah,
yeah, it absolutely was impactful. It would lead to depression. It would lead to melancholia. And,
exactly,
and we
right?
just,
And then they treated that with the saying, oh, you have too much black bile. And I saw that they kind of described it as your brain being cold and dry, which I thought was really interesting too, that they had this kind of description of what kind of depression would feel like within the body too, like how it kind of impacts the brain. Very interesting
right,
stuff.
right. So it's interesting. There's just like there are now. This the more I've been looking into this since you reached out to me, the deeper I've been going down this rabbit hole.
Excellent,
Um,
excellent.
just like in the modern world, there are different theories about mental health. There are different theories about how to treat it. There are different theories about the causes, about the best way to approach it. Same thing in the Middle Ages. Melancholy was actually, it seems to, it's called melancholia. Melancholy seems to have been a great concern in the medieval medical practice. It
Mm-hmm.
is addressed in numerous medical manuals, and there are, as I discovered recently, entire treatises that focus on just melancholy. I wrote down his name, Ibn Imram. In writing in the 10th century, he's an Arab doctor, and he basically synthesizes the works of Galen and Hippocrates, adding his own clinical observations in the field of melancholy, writes an entire treatise on melancholia. And he includes in it over 150 prescriptions for pharmacological treatments for melancholy, psychiatry.
No way.
It's psychiatry. And he talks about how to diagnose a patient, and he takes a holistic approach. He says you need to observe the patient for multiple days in their environment. You need to see how they live their lives, what kind of foods they eat, what they drink, what their external environment is like. And he says you need to take into consideration, you need to take a history. He talks about taking a history. You need to take a history and you need to figure out what they were like before the melancholy set in.
No way. So they
So
were figuring out that like childhood might connect. Is that what you're saying? What
yeah,
about
I mean,
family?
connect.
Did they
Yeah,
know about how like the family could impact mental
you
health?
all of it, all of it. It was all very important. You needed to look at the whole picture, and also you needed to know if their personality had changed. So he thought it was very crucial that if someone were very high energy before and now they're very low, like that is a form of depression. But he also said if you're very low energy before and now suddenly you're really high energy and super engaged, well, that's mania. So he's already talking about
Interesting. He's starting to
mania and
connect the
depression
pieces. Yeah.
as being two sides of the same coin.
Wow.
So yeah, I was as I was reading through some excerpts from his text, I even wrote down, in case you're interested, I wrote down one of his receipts, one of his recipes, one of his prescriptions, because a medieval, for those who aren't familiar with pharmacology, before we had mass produced drugs that come out of factories, pharmacologists, chemists as we call them, as they're called in the UK, or apothecaries in the older language, would compound a medicine. A doctor would write a prescription, which is a recipe. This much of this much of that, this much of this other thing. And they would give that to the apothecary, and the apothecary would compound it, would grind it, make it into the medicine. There are actually some pharmacists to this day who can do that. I actually got such a prescription from the ER a couple of years ago for an ulcer that had formed in my cheek, on the inside of my cheek. The doctor actually wrote an honest to God recipe for the pharmacist to compound for me.
No way. Did they send you to the?
Yeah.
It sounds like going to the what do you call it? Apothecary, right?
Right. I went to the local Walgreens and she was able to do it. So pharmacists are still being trained in this, right?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So here is this recipe for melancholy, right? And it's going to have some ingredients. I don't even know I didn't have a chance to go really dig deeply because there's a lot of herbs that I don't think they're definitely not local to where I grew up.
Too, right?
They're definitely not local to where I grew up. So he says to take fumwort, myrobalan, and dodder, grind them together until they're a powder. Then to knead in sesame seed, almond seed, or squash seed, or violet oil. Sesame oil, almond oil, squash seed oil, or violet oil. Yeah. And then to mix it with violet sap.
That sounds delicious, actually.
Right? Right? And then he says you should put it in a glass of warm water and drink it. Right? So we're talking, and if you think about these ingredients, I'm going to bet if I looked into their chemical composition, that there are a lot of really active ingredients in here that probably will impact your neurochemistry, right? Yeah. I mean, violets alone are a pretty active flower, and violet oil. We're talking essential oils because the Arabs had distillation. Right. So they actually had distilled essential oils. So, and violet sap.
Oils. Wow. That's the origin.
Now whether you could get those in Europe in this time, probably not. Probably they would have had to be imported. But remember, he's an Arab doctor writing about this. So yeah, this would probably be something, it would impact you, right? It would absolutely have an impact. How effective it would be for your depression?
Yeah, but he also talks the same time of medieval times is what I'm hearing, right? This specific doctor, just in a different
10th century. Yeah, so 10th century. So he's an Arab physician writing in the 10th century. And I think he was writing in Northern Africa. Tunisia, yes, right, Tunisia. He was living in Tunisia. So the Mediterranean, which is very interconnected in this era. And then
what's like the timeline of medieval times then?
So the Middle Ages, for those who don't know, I'm going to turn you down a little bit.
Sure.
Yeah, got to maybe sit back from your microphone a little bit. Yeah. So the Middle Ages, for those who don't know, is like basically it's the era literally between the antiquity, the ancient era, and the modern world. So more or less, it's kind of 500 to 1500, or I would personally put it as 500-ish to the Reformation in the 16th century. So those are the Middle Ages. It's 1,000 years. It's a long period.
Yeah, no, thank you for letting us know. I know it's common knowledge to a lot of people, but sometimes, if you're just joining in, especially if they're one of my subscribers, I'm not sure how much they know about the medieval times and Middle Ages and whatnot.
No, I mean, most people, I mean, I've seen someone recently published a book on manners in the Renaissance, and it includes the 17th century, which is absolutely not the Renaissance. So there's even debate about what eras count as, and eras are artificial, right? I mean, it's just us trying
Facts.
to categorize things. So
That's a really good
um,
point, right? Each to their own.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so I remembered us talking a little bit about different, kings, how their mental healths were different. And I'm curious if you ever heard about that dancing kind of plague situation.
Oh,
Do you know what I'm talking
choreomania.
about?
Yeah,
Yeah.
choreomania. So choreomania, it's this thing. It happens. It's for the earliest reported accounts are the end of the 15th and then the early 16th century. And it happens in Germany, and basically these people suddenly start twitching and spasming, and they can't stop. It's like a whole, and it becomes, it almost feels like it catches on with a report from the era that I read, the original primary source. It's been a little while since I read it, but basically it sounds like there was a small group, and then they started like infecting other people, and they end up kind of going on this procession through the village where they can't stop themselves. They're not really dancing. It's not like there was someone playing. It's not like it wasn't a dance marathon, I guess. So some
Okay.
people hear about it and they imagine like a really nice, benign dance marathon. It was not benign. It was terrifying because they literally couldn't stop themselves. And I've read some theories that maybe it was ergot poisoning. Ergot is a fungus that grows on rye when the rye doesn't dry properly, and then they make bread out of it anyway. And then the fungus doesn't. The toxins from the fungus aren't broken down by the baking process, and then you consume them, and then you experience toxic effects such as hallucinations. So I've also heard maybe it was St. Elmo's fire. So which we call it that because it's considered, at one point it was considered to be a curse by a saint, basically, but it's actually now a medical condition.
Yeah. I was hearing different theories about that actually. Like, was it
Yeah.
confirmed that that's what it was?
No. There's no confirmation.
Okay.
As far as I know, I don't think anyone has ever found any of the skeletons, and done any kind of actual analysis to see if they can identify a pathogen. So no, it's all theories. There's lots of theories about it, but
Yeah.
it was very short lived. It wasn't. It's not like the Black Death, which kept coming back every 10 to 20 years. It was a very brief window of time. And there's one chronicle I saw from a woodcut from the end of the 15th century depicting choreomania. And it actually shows the dancers going on to dancers. The patients going onto a bridge, and they cause the bridge to collapse from their motion, from their vibrations, according to this one chronicler. Now, granted, we're not talking about like the George Washington Bridge. We're talking about a small bridge over a creek, right? We're not talking London Bridge. It's nothing like that. But still, they fell into the creek, and apparently some of them drowned, according to the chronicler that I read.
I didn't hear that. I heard some died exhaustion or strokes, and I thought it was interesting too because I was looking up like mental health when it comes to medieval times. They're saying it might be kind of like a mass kind of hysteria type situation, which I thought pretty interesting. I mean, I feel like it would probably be more likely what you said, some sort of like poisoning or like accidental like hallucinogenics, something like that. But yeah, I could absolutely see people kind of snapping and then maybe just dancing it up. Like that is something that does happen in our modern day times. Sometimes like an entire school might get a particular like tick or twitch or something like that because of the stress, and it does kind of spread, right? Not necessarily anything that is physical. So
right.
I thought that was really interesting too, and I guess we'll never know unless we find some sort of missing puzzle piece. But
yeah, exactly. And we do actually, so that actually does happen, where we find find bodies from an event that we never expected to find. For example, they found Richard III's body in 2013 or 2012 in a car parking lot in Lincoln. And we literally, he died in battle, at the Battle of Bosworth, and his body was dismembered. And so we just, everyone assumed that we would never, ever, ever find his body. And lo, they found it when they were digging up a car parking lot. I mean,
wow.
So maybe, right? So maybe we will find some victims of choreomania and then be able to do some kind of actual, pathogenic analysis. That would be really interesting. But it could be mass hysteria. Mass hysteria it's an event recorded across cultures and across history. So
it's just so fascinating that can happen, right? This like psychological thing that happens, and we kind of absorb each other's coping mechanisms in that sense, right? It's like,
yep.
Like I just try to imagine that happening back in the day, and imagining somebody just snapping from all the pressure of everything, and they just start to dance, and then somebody else starts to dance, and then just all joining in together because they're just absolutely just exhausted. And sometimes that can create these like psychological breaks almost.
Yeah, so the time when it was happening is after the Black Death has become endemic, which means that every 10 to 20 years, the plague comes back across Europe and massive numbers of people keep dying. So, like I said, Alessandra Strozzi lost half of her immediate family, including her husband, to the Black Death. And that's actually, the Black Death changes ideas about death. It actually makes it much more immediate. Because before, yes, it was understood that everyone would die, but once you have this pathogen that keeps coming back and will kill everyone indiscriminately, right? Young, old, rich, poor, that changes how people start viewing death, and it makes it much more immediate. It made people started feeling like death was ever present. Not just that it occasionally came for a visit, that it was always with them, basically. And that's why you start seeing in art, death being as a allegorical figure being depicted very, very frequently. You see memento mori in a lot of art. Remember you are mortal. You see, there's in jewelry, there's this gorgeous jewel, one in particular I'm thinking of from the end of the 15th century, that on one side is two lovers in jewels, like carved into gems set in this beautiful gold setting. Ooh. But on the other side is death, carved into a cameo, right? So the death would actually, whoever wore this, the death head, the skeleton of death, the Grim Reaper, would have been against their skin, and the lovers would have been presented to the front. So we start seeing that is a post-bubonic plague, post-second bubonic plague outbreak phenomenon. So yeah, you could absolutely see that the end of the 15th century and early 16th century, people could be super stressed about, it could have been I don't know, it might have been I haven't looked to see if there were any local or recent outbreaks of the plague where the choreomania occurred. So it could be a stress response.
That's a really good point. I didn't even think of that it might have been caused by the Black Plague, causing the dancing plague. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and it's
as a therapist too, I find like grief is such a hard thing to process, right? I feel like it does, or at least from my personal experience, it doesn't come naturally for me, of like how to grieve properly where you're not becoming like really either melancholy, as they call it, or just overwhelmed by it all. So I'm curious how they did process grief and all the death and whatnot back in the day.
So mourning was much more ceremonial, and in the modern West, we have discarded so many ceremonies, and I think to our detriment, and to our psychological detriment. Ceremonies are a way that we as humans process. We make tangible the intangible. It's the way in which we can process these abstract concepts, these abstract ideas, like life, like death. So ceremony is a way that we can engage with grief, because grief is also intangible. It has physical expressions, but grief itself is intangible. So there was mourning ceremonies, right? You had There were funerary rituals that were followed. There was a period that was acknowledged that there should be a period of mourning during which the expectations, normal daily life expectations, were not expected of the immediate family, right? And depending on when and where in Europe, that period could be a month or multiple months, depending on your station in society. You would wear mourning clothing, right? You would actually wear either white or black garments, depending on when and where, because there's a shift across the Middle Ages from white being the color of mourning to black being the color of mourning. And so we actually have expense accounts from the 15th century that talk about ordering mourning clothing for the whole household, not just for the Duke and the Duchess, but for everyone in the household, for instance. So there were rituals that surrounded mourning that allowed people to cope with it, to work through it, right? And it's very clear that it was not expected that you should be a fully functioning human in the immediate aftermath, right? Which is very contrary to a lot of places like in the U.S. today. There isn't much. Not many people get a break, the time
really
to actually mourn.
Canada. Absolutely, we're really lucky in Canada that we get a little bit more wiggle room as compared to the States, but
right.
I agree. If you had to bring back one tradition, I guess, that they had back then, kind of in the grieving process, what would you bring back?
Gosh, I mean, honestly, I think time. People need time, right? You need time to not have to work, maybe even to not have to clean, to not have to do anything, right? To actually allow yourself to fully feel what has happened. And that's the other thing. Oh, yes, right. Mourning, big part of mourning in the Middle Ages. How could I forget this? You'll be interested in this. Was a very, very loud and visible wailing, keening. This is recorded all across Europe. It was not just accepted, but expected, especially in the immediate aftermath of someone dying, that they talk about people tearing their hair out, right? And that wasn't regarded as something that shouldn't be done. It was regarded as something that happened, that you should feel your feelings and literally express them, press them out of your body, right?
Yeah.
Physically, that you should be fully allowed to be emotional, men and women, by the way, not just women. Yep. Men and women should express their feelings of grief loudly, voluminously, in a way that will actually rebalance your humors.
So right? True, though. I think that there's something to be said about crying and really letting it out. For those of you who know, I'm married to someone who's from Pakistan, and the funerals there are very different from the ones here, right? Over there is a lot of crying very, very loudly. Somebody in the family passed away recently, and he said, why don't you be responsible for watching the kids, because it gets really intense. So it is out there, but definitely in Canada, I guess, or the States, kind of Western culture, I would say it's more of a quiet, grieving of tears.
It's become,
you have to try to be strong, right?
It's become very quiet, and I have a theory why. It's the Protestant Reformation. Almost anything that's bad about modern society can be traced back to the Protestant Reformation, because the Protestant, almost everything that all the different sects of Protestantism in the 16th century, they set themselves up in opposition to the church, which we now call the Catholic Church. Right. So anything that was a common practice in the Catholic Church, we don't want to do it that way anymore, just almost as a point of difference. And I get that. I understand. You're starting something new. You want it to be new. Henry VIII's Reformation Church wasn't really very Reformation. Henry VIII's version of a Reformation church was basically the Catholic Church, but with him as the head of the church. Whereas the Anglican Church thereafter, under Elizabeth, actually became more different from the actual Catholic Church. But a lot of that, what that means is that all of those old practices of grieving were viewed as heathen, as pagan, in fact, as being a continuation of ancient Roman paganism, in some cases literally called that. And so, grieving got very solemn. It got very quiet. It was expected that you shouldn't show emotions, like those kinds of emotions should be swallowed up and internalized. That's a big part of the Puritan movement, for instance. So,
It's
whereas
really
in
like,
a
where's the
medieval
balance,
funeral,
right? Do you feel like there is a balance, or do you think you should really go hard? What are
I
your
mean,
opinion
you
personally?
should, whatever it is you feel, you should let it out. Right? Like how many of us, and I'm holding my hand up here, how many of us when we're reading a book that makes us cry or watching a movie or show that makes us cry, we just kind of go, right?
Keep it
That's me.
together.
I don't want to
Yeah.
show, I don't want to show the weakness,
What's the
right?
first movie that made you cry?
God, I don't know, probably something, Bambi when I was little,
Oh yeah,
when
I
his
didn't
mother gets
understand
killed.
Bambi, but Titanic, that made me weep.
I
It
understood
just,
his mother was dead.
yeah,
I probably, but I was a little girl, so it was okay to cry, right?
exactly.
Um, but in the Middle Ages, not only was it okay to cry when someone died, wealthy people would hire professional mourners, and professional mourners were literally weepers. They were supposed to weep aloud while burying your coffin to the graveyard. Like that's how important loud mourning was, that they would make sure there was plenty of crying at your funeral by hiring professional mourners. So yeah, that was a big part of the grieving process, was letting it out, even if it
Professional
wasn't really your
mourners.
feelings.
Wow. Okay, that didn't happen in the medieval times, did it?
Oh yeah.
Really?
Oh
Even
yeah.
then?
Oh yeah. No, professional mourners, 100%. And in fact, so this was a way that poor people could actually get nice new clothes. And it was a way also that the recently deceased could maybe score points and shorten their time in purgatory. They would actually bequeath in their will new clothing for 20 poor of the parish, is usually how it's phrased, to be mourners at their funeral. And mourners meaning
What?
weepers, like they
I
should
had
be
no
crying. Yeah, so
idea.
they would actually get a new undershirt, they would get a nice new tunic, and maybe even a robe over top, a doublet or a robe over top of that. And it was literally for the poor of the parish. And this is a practice all across medieval Europe. And they
So
would weep.
what was the point of it though? Just to show that they were very loved, or was
I think,
it
what is the point of any ceremony? It's to ensure, once again to score points in the afterlife,
okay?
to
Score
shorten your
points in the
time,
afterlife. Yeah.
because you're showing charity, right? You're showing charity,
Yeah.
very very tangible charity, by bequeathing very expensive clothes to these poor people, right? So you're shortening time and period. And in addition to weeping at your funeral, these individuals should also pray for you. So they should
Yeah.
pray to help shorten your time in purgatory. So it was a very selfish form of altruism,
I was
of
gonna say, it's like it is
philanthropy.
altruistic, but they are getting something out of it, right? And that's the
Yeah,
tricky
yeah,
part. It's like, where do we draw the line? We could
yeah.
talk all day about altruism and like whether
What
it's
is
real or
altruism? Is there
not.
altruism?
Exactly.
Does it
Is there?
exist? Yeah,
Yeah, that's more philosophical for another day, maybe.
baby. Yeah. But yeah,
Yeah.
so it was loud, and I suspect it was probably very effective as a coping mechanism, to really just be loud and wet and messy with it in the immediate aftermath, and then to move on. Right? It's a kind of purging, really, if you think about it.
It is. It absolutely is. And I think, it's interesting that religion back in the day too was kind of a way of handling these dark times as well, right? They were still like
Yep.
praying, and like that was a really strong outlet for people as well. So, not to discount that they were just feeling left alone, they still had a really strong connection with their higher power.
They did, and one of the things about even modern day Catholicism, but especially medieval Catholicism, was it was very meditative, because you would pray the Rosary, right? So you have beads on a string, that where you have 10 beads are Our Fathers, and then you have a Hail Mary, right? And then you're just going through repeating the same prayer over and over and over again for a fairly long time. And as you know, that's meditative. That will put you in a trance-like state,
So
which is
true.
relaxing to your mind, right? It's
Right.
actually relaxing.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Okay, sorry. I do have some questions from my
Yes.
folks over here.
Yes,
Apologies.
absolutely.
Little
No, no,
side
absolutely.
chat.
Lay it on. Because
Okay.
unfortunately, so everyone, I just want you to know, I'm not ignoring the live chat, but the live chat froze like 40 minutes
Oh
ago.
no. Okay, no
So
worries.
oh wait, and then it just started again. I hate you, live chat. Why are you,
Why are
why are
you
you
like
like
this?
this?
I know technical difficulties are the bane of our existence, let's be honest. Okay, so do you think, somebody asked, David asked, do you think if people from that time or era woke up earlier in the daytime, do you think that affected their mental health? Added that part in
So
at the end.
that's a great question. So actually, this is something we should read. One of the many aspects of daily life from the Middle Ages that I think would benefit us is a medieval sleep schedule, and that is because in everyone, I don't care whether you were a laborer or a peasant, which is a farmer, or a merchant, a craftsman, lord, lady, king, queen, people woke up basically with the sun, right?
Wow,
They
yeah.
woke up with the sun because this is a pre-electric world. There are no electric lights. Lighting is expensive, and also, yes, oil lamps can actually be very bright, but you need a bunch of them to create really good light. So most productive work is going to be done during daylight. You're not going to do a
Interesting.
lot without daylight. And there were guild statutes that forbade items to be produced during to candlelight or to lamplight. You had to have daylight to do embroidery, to make clothing, to make items, because it was acknowledged that daylight was the best light. So most people woke up with the sun.
Interesting.
And
So
they would
they weren't able to do that. It was just to protect their eyes, or was there another other reason for
it was
that?
quality it was quality of work, right?
Oh, okay.
So it was acknowledged that the quality of embroidery that was done to lamplight or candlelight was going to be significantly less than embroidery that's performed to daylight or created with sunlight, right?
Right.
So it's just it was to protect the quality of the products that were being produced by members of a particular guild, so that they could actually ensure their socioeconomic status and their economic place in the hierarchy, right? But that means that people didn't purposefully try to get up at dark to go work. They got up with the sun. There's also no street lights. Like, most places don't have torches that are just set out and left burning all night to provide light. That's expensive,
That's a really good
and
point.
also possibly dangerous to just leave torches burning all over your city where your buildings are made of wood. Just saying,
Yeah,
you
maybe
don't.
not. Exactly. I can totally
So
understand why they would just go to sleep then and take their time there. Okay, so you're saying
and
it would probably,
yeah, and
honestly, I find that when you look at the studies, most people who are morning birds actually have better mental health as compared to those who are night owls, which I'm guilty as charged. I'm a
yeah,
night owl myself. But yeah, there is something to be said about kind of waking up with the sun, getting things done in the morning, while things are peaceful and
yep,
calm.
yep.
Yeah.
Yep, and then you've heard of you must have heard of biphasic sleeping. Have you heard of biphasic sleeping?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know if people are actually finally starting to practice this, but biphasic sleeping is the pre-modern way all humans apparently slept. So biphasic sleeping is a practice whereby you go to sleep usually kind of when the sun goes down, more or less, when it gets dark, and you sleep for about 4 hours ish, and then your body naturally wakes up. Your body, this is most people suffering from insomnia are fighting their body's natural tendency for biphasic sleeping.
Mm-hmm.
So but everyone would wake up at roughly the same time in the middle of the night, and they would talk, they would play games. If there was something productive they could do that didn't require good strong light, they would do that, and then they would go back to sleep, and they would sleep for another 4 hours or until sunrise.
Have you ever
They
done the
wouldn't fight.
practice?
Yes, it's great.
I should really give it a try because I tend to wake up around 4 in the morning usually. So yeah, maybe I'll give it a
You
shot
should
and see
you
what
should I mean,
happens.
all modern everything I've read about insomnia modernly says that if you wake up and you're awake, don't fight it. Get up, do some stuff, and then go back to sleep. That's what they did in the Middle Ages. Don't fight it, just lean into it. And
Cool.
it's yeah, it's kind of, of course, unfortunately, with factories are really what changed everything. Um, factories are what what basically changed everything, because factories have to operate on a schedule. And so suddenly the majority of people go from working in the country, being an agrarian society, to a factory based society in the 19th century. And so that changes the sleep schedule entirely. And also then we have gas lights and electric lights, which allow us to work late into the night and get up really early in the morning. And so we've basically, electrification has probably been really bad for our mental health.
That's
It,
really, yeah,
it's
probably, right? The circadian rhythm gets confused and everybody's affected with it. Screen time, absolutely. If you guys have that night setting on your phones, I would
yeah,
highly
use it,
recommend that too. Yep.
use it,
There's a
use it.
reason why it's there.
Mine goes on tonight at like 9 p.m. and it's, it's so much better for your eyes if you're going to be on a screen, which you really shouldn't be, but whatever.
It happens in this society. I don't know about you, but it's very hard to escape. Um,
I'm the problem is a lot of the things I'm reading are like reports, journal articles, and
yeah.
around 8 p.m. my brain starts going, "Ooh, let's read some new journal articles." So I'm like on Gestor reading journal articles until like 10 p.m. or 10:30, and my brain just doesn't want to shut down. It's like, oh, more information. Let me consume more information. I don't doom scroll. People always ask me Ryan asked me, like, did you see this video on Facebook? I'm like, no, baby, I'm a content creator. I don't have time to watch
There you go.
content.
Exactly. So much the same. But I am guilty of like scrolling and getting stuck in the scroll at nighttime. It's a
I,
problem. Sometimes you need some
it's
good
it's
ideas, right? Every once in a while, do a little bit of research. At least that's what I tell myself. It's probably not that. I'm just doom
yeah.
scrolling. Right? But anyways, unfortunately, guys, I do have to wrap up at 9 o'clock here. So I just want to kind of wrap things up with saying thank you to Creative Contessa again for this fun live stream. This was always very insightful. And again, if you guys want to follow me too, Johanna Dinsdale, you just look me up on YouTube. Yeah, just to wrap things up though, I guess I want to go back to what you were saying. You wouldn't go back in time without a medical kit, but if you could go back in time, what would you want to be back then?
Oh
Out of
gosh, yeah.
curiosity,
I
would you want
mean,
to be a
yeah,
knight?
that's no, God, no. Knights, what a brutish life. No, knights were very likely to die pooping themselves to death in a battlefield somewhere. So
Maybe not the best.
I'm not terribly into that. No, if who would I be? Being a noble woman is really the way to go.
A noble woman. Yeah.
If you're going to be, you're going to want to be a noble woman. That's going to be it. I would probably not. I want to be a queen. Depending on when and where, being a queen is actually not a bad gig in Europe. It's actually a good gig. You can actually have a lot of power, especially if you're in the Iberian Peninsula. Queens in the Iberian Peninsula reign in their own right. Unlike France, where in the middle of the Middle Ages, they pass laws that say that women can no longer inherit the throne and be queens regnant. But on the Iberian Peninsula, there were many queens regnant, and so I don't know. It might be nice to be a queen regnant in the Iberian Peninsula. Also, the Iberian Peninsula is super sophisticated with infrastructure and technology, because basically the Roman infrastructure never broke down, and then the Arabs come and bring more high tech infrastructure. And so it's this really advanced place. The cities are beautiful with running water and beautiful baths everywhere, bathhouses everywhere, gorgeous architecture. So yeah, probably maybe Iberian Peninsula, queen, not a bad
Yeah,
gig.
that sounds beautiful. I think I might steal your idea. Noble woman, definitely not King Henry VIII's wives. I would say no to that gig for sure. But thank you
No.
again. And guys, if you want to continue on this stream, I think you're going to stick around for a little bit longer, right?
Yeah. I'll stick around for a little bit longer. But everyone, check out Johanna Dinsdale's YouTube. She's also on Instagram, and make sure to subscribe. And I keep forgetting, if you guys have been enjoying this, double tap that screen to like.
Yeah,
Beyond subscribing. Yeah, remember engagement. Well, Johanna, I think I personally, I still have so much information to share. Would you like to do this again next week?
Yeah, 100%. Let's do it. Friday,
Okay.
8 p.m.
Yeah. Same bat time, same bat channel for those who get that reference.
Lovely. All right, guys. Well, take care and multi goodbyes.
Okay. See you later, Johanna.